Great. Welcome back to Embodied Healing with the Women's Resource Center at SDSU. We're actually going to wait a couple of minutes just to see. I know some folks tend to come in a little bit later, so we'll start at 2:04 or 5 just to see if anyone else wants to hop on. In the meantime, I can pause the recording. Oh, yes, there we go. Thanks, love. Okay, so here we go. All right, so we just did check-ins for those of you watching the recording, and we're going to move into our grounding practice for today. So as always, we'll start with orienting, which as a reminder is a way for us to scan our environment using the senses so that external input, the input of our external surroundings rather, can signal to our internal state that there's relative safety. And so this really helps with slowing down. It helps with anxiety. It helps with like any form of like speed. So like you're feeling like you're moving really fast. Taking a moment to orient to your surroundings can help slow you down and down regulate your nervous system. And yeah, definitely also for presence, which I think with presence, there's awareness, and with awareness, there can be choice. And so when we slow down, we get to choose better for ourselves and for those that we serve. So go ahead and look around your space, perhaps taking a soft gaze as you name objects in your mind, perhaps the color of that object, the texture, and then also looking for and noticing the space in between the object and your body. Just looking around, not needing to focus really hard on anything unless it's calling to you. Maybe there's a color that's standing out that feels centering and grounding. And here we'll just take a deep breath in, however that appears to you in your body. And exhale. We'll do two more like that. Noticing if there are any smells as you take your next inhale. And release. Just noticing perhaps where your hands are placed just right here and now. And perhaps moving your fingertips on the surface of whatever you're touching. Again, allowing for the awareness to be in and hang out in that sense of touch. You can name the surface, the color. And as you hear the sound of my voice, perhaps also noticing any ambient noises, sounds that are inside the building that you're in. Noticing now the sounds that are outside of the building. Noticing how tuning to these senses might create a little bit more presence, a little bit more here and now. If you have water or tea, or if not, maybe just licking your lips and your teeth and noticing what you taste. It's okay if it's unpleasant. Beautiful. From here, we're going to turn our senses inward. So practicing that muscle of interoception, which is a key integral part of somatics. Being able to sense with the five senses the internal state of our body. And so perhaps just noticing first the position of your body and see if you'd like to adjust, make yourself a bit more comfortable, even if it's just 2% more comfortable, is there anything you can do to meet your body where it's at? Engaging your breath once more, perhaps this time drawing the breath down, down, down towards the pelvic floor. Letting the exhale be natural. 2 more deep inhales. And exhale. 1 more inhale. And this time, as you exhale, drop your awareness down through your central channel, all the way down past your tailbone, down through your energetic roots. Taking a moment here to visualize your roots in your mind's eye, or perhaps imagining that these roots are growing from the bottom of your seat down into the soil of the earth, effortlessly connecting to this nourishment, the land that we live on, acknowledging her for her regenerative powers, her co-regulative powers, and perhaps noticing how deep your roots want to grow today. Maybe it wants to go deep and down all the way through the mycelium network, down through the sand and the soil, reaching for watery layers, gaseous layers, perhaps all the way down to the fiery core. Perhaps just allowing yourselves a few moments here in the deep and darkness of the earth, allowing for a yin state. We're very used to being in yang, which is about doing and action and giving. So dropping down into a yin state where we're more receptive, where we're slower in motion. Just noticing what it's like, maybe visualizing your roots forming a cocoon for you to lay within. Taking a few deep breaths here in the cocoon if you choose to. And seeing how this cocoon is semi-permeable, where not only does it keep out what's not wanted or needed, any toxins, but it also allows in nutrients, allows in what does serve, what does regenerate your life force. Perhaps noticing what's in your cocoon with you. Maybe it's an energetic quality of peace. Maybe it's an element like water. Maybe it's fluffy blankets or soft pillows. Maybe it's a bed of grass or like a cloud. Let this cocoon beneath your root space hold you and all that you're carrying. I wonder if with your next breath, you could soften just 5% more into receptivity. This energetic receptivity of getting what you need. Rest, care, slowness, softness. And I wonder, as you attune to this cocoon that's deep down in the earth with your root space, I wonder how that might reflect in the internal landscape of your body. For example, you might notice perhaps energetic flowing in the belly or in the heart space. Maybe there's expansion and contraction. Maybe you don't feel anything at all. That's okay too. Perhaps imagining where this cocoon might live in the body, this energetic attunement to the cocoon might want to find a home in the body. For me, it's in my belly, the center where we first received what we need. Holding this nourishing, semi-permeable cocoon, where here we don't need to perform, we don't need to prove ourselves. We can just receive. And maybe that's hard. Maybe it's hard to imagine receiving right now, and that's okay. Before we come back to the screen, I'd love to invite you to call in something, someone, or an object that helps you feel safe and supported. So it can be like an older, wiser self, a higher self. It can be an ancestor. It can be a living or deceased family member. It can be something in nature like the ocean and her waves and her endless horizon. It can be trees that grow roots deep all the way down as long as they grow tall, as deep as they are tall. It can be an actual blanket. It could be an animal like a dog or a cat. And as you call in this resource, even if it's not physically with you, perhaps imagining what it would be like to have this resource just sit right next to you. What would it feel like to be in their presence? What are the energetic qualities that they carry that help you feel safe and supported? And as you attune to this resource, you can take your time. It's okay if you haven't found anything. Maybe choosing something that is in your physical surroundings, like a warm cup of tea, or the softness of the cushion beneath you that's also supporting you. The four walls of your home that are keeping you safe. And as you attune to this sense of relative safety and support, I wonder how the body might relate to that, how the body might receive that. Maybe there's a softening in the tailbone or in the jaw. Maybe a natural breath in and the natural breath out. And so this practice of somatic resourcing helps us create the capacity in our body through introspection, right? Through being able to sense for sensations, temperatures, textures in the body. And so when we invite in the resource, what are the textures and temperatures, sensations, emotions in the body that let you know that you're safe and supported? Because it's one thing to say, I'm safe and supported. It's another thing to feel safe and supported. You can really feel that landing for you all. So just taking maybe a few more moments to notice what it's like to feel safe and supported, even if it's just a small amount of relative safety. Some parts of you can feel unsafe, and that's okay too. All parts of you are welcomed. Beautiful. Let's take a few deep breaths here, and you're welcome to stay here in this energetic space for a few more moments. And if you're ready, you can gently blink open the eyes, looking around your space once more before coming back to the screen, naming objects and colors. It's 2:22 p.m., Thursday, October 28th, 29th, sorry. Yeah. Welcome back. I hope that was nourishing for you. Please feel free to drop in the chat how that felt, maybe a word or two or something that stood out to you. Know that you can share anytime. So some group agreements, self-consent and sovereignty. Please meet yourself where you are. If things begin to feel like it's a little bit too much, if you're noticing yourself checking out or getting anxious or edgy, please feel free to pause. You can mute me out for a few moments. Know that there's a recording for you to watch and come back to. I always like to say that what you need to hear the most today will land. So know that even though FOMO can be a real thing, what's most important is that you meet yourself where you are and that you can regulate and self-soothe so that you're not pushing yourself beyond your limits and beyond your window of tolerance. Everything I share is an invitation, so please feel free to opt out of any shares. You can turn off your video or turn it on at any time. And if you decide to share and decide that you change your mind, that's welcome too. You're here to you're really invited to take your time, to take up space as much as you want. And there's no need to feel rushed during sharing. You can take up as much space as you need. And when you feel complete, you can check in with yourself and say, I'm complete, so that we know that you're complete and won't cut you off before you're complete. We're here really to listen and receive, not respond to one another. Myself included. I may offer reflections, and if you ask for specific guidance, I'm happy to share anything that I can. Confidentiality and anonymity is really important, so whenever we have shares, the recording will be paused. We're in this together. All parts of you are welcome here. So no matter what level you are, where you are in your healing, know that this is a place where we get to care for you. And again, all levels welcome. There's no right or wrong way to be healing. There's no, it's not a race, right? Like who can heal first. Interdependence and trust means that I invite you to trust in the sovereignty and the inherent wisdom of each person that's here. So whenever you're sharing or whatever that it is that you bring, I trust that you know what's best for you. And even though it might not feel accessible in that moment, like what is best for me, I trust that we can ask you the right questions to get to what is best for you instead of telling you what's best for you. Okay. So feel free to offer love and encouragement through the chat or with body language. I know sometimes on Zoom people like snapping fingers or putting their hands up as a beam. All right, any requests or feedback for container setting? Please feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording so that we can do introductions and shares. So we just shared and something came up around this relationship between rest and needing to keep going and keep doing, which is culturally the norm, right? To keep pushing, to keep like overworking and multitasking and all of that. Sometimes when we're stuck in these cycles of hyper and hypo arousal, so like moving very fast and then collapsing into like, I'm so tired, I can't do anything else. Sometimes when we're stuck in these cycles, oftentimes our thinking is very black and white. It's either I have to rest completely, or I have to keep working and I can't rest, right? It's like this black and white. So what helps sometimes is offering like a gray scale. So if you think of like the gray scale, how it like goes from black to white, like kind of seamlessly, and it's a gradient, right? And imagine that like every pixel of that gradient is a possibility, right? So instead of white being I have to rest and black being I must keep going, is there some possibility in between? So maybe it could be scheduling in breaks, where in your day you schedule like 2 or 3 30-minute breaks, and you hold yourself accountable to like turning off the computer and the phone and just laying down, and then noticing like how, wow, this is really hard, like to lay down and not do anything, but can I like be with that intensity without needing to go straight back to work, right? Can I sit with this discomfort of, okay, I'm resting now, right? And if that doesn't feel doable, then another possibility, right? Again, multiple possibilities, is maybe rest can be I go for a walk, just like a quick walk around the block, or take a shower, maybe make yourself something really yummy to eat, right? Rest can look differently, but the idea is that you're carving out time where you're not working, and then having a ritual at the end of your day to help slow down. Because I think someone shared, when we work from home, it's really hard to have boundaries. I have the same thing yesterday. I was working and I like didn't know when to stop, right? Because it's like right there. And so what I've started to do is I actually I would take a shower, like how I would if I came home from work. I'd take a shower and I would change my clothes. So then the energy has shifted from work to, okay, now I'm slowing down in my day. So there's possibilities when I think sometimes when there are these tensions of like black and white, if we can explore like what is most doable, keywords being really doable, and small, that compound over time. Yeah. Hope that was helpful. You can put it in the chat if you want. Yeah. Okay. Great. So please feel free to drop in the chat if anything else comes up. Our theme for today is embodied truth telling. And so I have a short lesson followed by a story about embodied truth telling that I want to share with you. And then we'll do processing shares. We'll end with Reiki. I have a feeling that we'll only have enough time for Reiki. Okay, let me just continue. I'll offer a practice too that you can do on your own. Okay, so embodied truth telling, what is it? It is the capacity. So how much capacity, how able are we to know what our truth is, to claim that it's our truth, and to take up space with it through embodied expression. So I know it's a lot of words, let's break it down. What is knowing our truth, right? Our truth can include, what do I identify with or as? What is my story, right? What are the experiences that I've been through? What have I grown through? What have I survived through? What do I need? What is my actual capacity to meet a thing or an experience? How did this experience feel for me? What do I really think about what I've been asked to do or be responsible for? And what are my limits and boundaries around this experience? So any answers to these questions relating to anything. So like, what is my actual capacity to meet this thing or experience? For example, my truth in terms of my capacity to meet this class, this session, is great. Like I have a lot of capacity and that's my truth. But for other things, like say for example, like, I don't know, I'm just pulling something out of the air, like an old client that suddenly is messaging me in a state of emergency, needing to see me now. My truth is that in the past,
I would have overridden my capacity and said, okay, what do you need? And like drop everything. But my truth is that actually I can't meet this thing or this experience right now. And sometimes that truth is hard to say, right? Because it's like I'm turning away someone that trusts me, someone that knows I can hold space for them. But the truth is, in that moment, my actual capacity is, no, I can't meet you. And what I would do in that case is actually say, I don't have the capacity right now to meet you, but I will in 2 hours. Can I talk to you then? Right? So truth telling can sometimes be really edgy because, again, we think there's this black and white, right? But there's a gradient of possibilities. And if we can practice that type of thinking, we can still be interdependent. So I can still meet this person's need, but it's not going to come at the expense of my truth, which is not right now. Is this making sense so far? Yeah? Let me know. Great. So our truth also includes changing your mind, right? If you say yes to something and then you realize that actually it's a no, that's your truth. Owning up to a mistake is really hard sometimes, but if your truth is that you know you messed up, owning up to it can be hard, but that's our truth, right? That has totally happened to me where I made a mistake and owning up to it felt really hard. And sure, there were repercussions, but there was integrity in me telling the truth and saying I messed up. Feeling remorse for that mistake or something that you messed up on, and being in integrity with your values. So truth telling sometimes is we make a wrong decision or we chose wrongly, but then we realize a greater truth. And so that doesn't mean that what we first chose was wrong. It's just meant that it was the evolution of us coming into our most authentic truth. And so there's never a right or wrong thing, right? Like you said that before, so have you changed your mind, right? It's like both of those experiences were true for you in that moment. In that moment, you said, yes, that was your truth. But your truth can change because you now have more information, you've evolved, you've learned something about yourself. And so that's your truth. The second part of embodied truth telling is then claiming that it's our truth. So first we've identified what's the truth, and now we get to claim it and then inhabit the fullness of our truth in our body, mind, and spirit. So where does this truth live, right? What do I need to feel around this truth? And I'll tell a story later that will give you a bit more clarity perhaps on this. What do I need to feel around this truth? Now that I've named my truth, now I know what it is. How do I feel about it? There are feelings attached to this truth, right? I messed up. Maybe there's guilt or remorse. What do I think about the truth? What does this truth mean about me and my relationships now that I'm holding this truth? And what does this truth need to be expressed? What does it need to feel safe to be expressed, right? Does it need to be validated? Does it need affirmation? Does it need does it need an answer? Does it need a solution, right? So what does the truth need so that it can be expressed? And the embodiment is when we can sense for the truth in our bodies. We can feel it's a yes or a no clearly. And so that was the exercise that I was going to guide you all in, this feeling in the body, whether it's a yes or a no. So we might have time for that if I continue just moving on here. Please feel free to pause me at any time or drop in the chat if you need anything. And then the last bit around embodied truth telling is taking up space with our truth. Sharing it with someone we can trust who has the capacity to meet us without fixing or judgment. And so say, for example, the one that I used just now, somebody came to me because they trusted me to meet them without fixing them or judging them. In that moment, I didn't have the capacity. But what that person can trust is when I have the capacity, I will meet them. So it kind of goes back to this inter-sovereignty, right? Of like, I get to decide what's my capacity, and your needs also matter. and both of our needs can be met. And so sometimes truth telling can feel hard because when we tell our truth to someone, we get shamed or gaslit or repressed for it. I know that might feel really hard to hear. Maybe there's some truth to that, right? And it also includes the embodied expression of our truth. So how does it want to be expressed? We named that earlier. How does this look in terms of how I behave, how I dress, how I move? The embodied, so the body expression of our truth. What does that look like? And how does it feel in my body when I experience or share it with others? So one is the outward embodiment expression, and the other is the internal embodiment of your truth. I'm going to pause here for a moment just to see how we're doing. Is this topic making sense so far? I know I'm kind of moving a bit quickly. I wanted to make sure that we had time. Does this feel helpful? This is a topic that feels relevant to you? Maybe after I share my story, then it might make more sense. Okay, good. So sometimes we don't want to look at our truth, not by choice, but from our subconscious mind's programming to protect us. Right? We might not want to look at our truth because we're afraid of rejection or repression. And systemically and culturally, this is true, especially for folks who have been historically marginalized, BIPOC, especially. Our truth is often erased, rejected, and oppressed, right? And so this is true on a cultural and systemic level. And so even though it's hard to be like, how do I like begin to change that narrative? It's our responsibility to heal ourselves so that we can change the narrative. Yes, we've been historically and systemically oppressed, and healing it changes the narrative. When we grow in our capacity to tell our truth and take up space with our truth, we're being countercultural, right? We're resisting the dominant narrative that BIPOC are used as, for Asian folks, mostly we're like a wedge where we're used to push the narrative, to support the narrative of whiteness. Just pausing there till noticing like, ooh, that was hard to name. Even for me, I was like dissociating a little bit. Right. So knowing that systemically and culturally our truth is often repressed, right, or erased, can we grow in our capacity to take up space with that truth? Yeah. And I'm still in that journey, trust me. I may have, a bit more experience in taking up space with my truth, but I feel very comfortable doing that with other BIPOC. When it comes to like whiteness and like white folks, it tends to be a bit harder for me to name my truth because, again, that white gaze, can represent that historically, that historical conditioning that not only have I lived through, but my ancestors as well. And sometimes we might not want to look at it because once we look at our truth and claim our truth, it means we have to heal it, right? It's like, oh shit, this is my truth. This did happen to me. This is my story. This is something that I identify it. How do I feel about this? How am I going to heal myself so that I can embody this part of me? And this is totally okay. It's part of the process to avoid, right? It's okay to avoid. We grow our capacity to meet our truth. Okay, I think I want to share my story and then we'll take the break because I think since it's kind of fresh, it might feel helpful to hear the story and then we'll take a break and then we'll do sharing when we come back. Okay. So the truth that I wanted to share with you is that I only very recently realized that I'm queer bisexual. I had always liked both men and women, and actually my attraction towards women came first. But because I lived, and we all live, but especially in Malaysia, a cis heteronormative culture, a patriarchal culture, I didn't know that being into women was actually a thing. I genuinely thought that it's impossible that I would be attracted to women, because I thought the only thing that's acceptable and normal is men and women together, right? And it wasn't until I grew up and then started to understand queerness and LGBTQIA rights that this is actually a thing that people do have. It is, sexual orientation is a spectrum. But it wasn't until this year that I realized that I was queer. And how that came about was actually I was healing my shame around my sexuality. I was not healing I'm queer. I was healing I have sexual trauma. And as I grew in my capacity to heal, to name that I'm a survivor, there was a moment where I was laying in bed with my partner thinking about what it means to be a sexual being, what it means to have sexual needs, that I realized that I'm queer. And I came out to myself. I started to remember all the women in my life that I was once attracted to. Like from the ages of 7, I can remember, I can name the girl that I was really attracted to, but I had no idea that it was attraction. I thought we were just close friends. As an adult, I've had relationships in my life with women where it was like a different kind of feeling. And then when I realized my truth that I'm queer, that like, oh, those were not just close friendships. Like there were some of my friendships where like I can distinctly remember where I genuinely had attraction towards them. And so once I knew my truth, I know what it was, and I claimed it, then I had to feel the feelings around it. I started to grieve. I was grieving that I never felt safe enough until now to claim this part of myself. I grieve that all those relationships that I had with those women, I didn't know that I had a need to be seen as queer, as attracted to them. And so grieving that was part of embodied truth telling for me. And so now I get to embody my queerness. And because I've had practice, taking up space for my truth wasn't always easy, but I've had practice, small truth telling here and there. But so then this big one felt doable, right? I could easily tell it to my friends. But where I struggled telling my truth was with my partner. And when I realized that that was my new truth, the new truth was I'm queer, but I'm afraid of telling my partner. And that was my truth. And so when I claimed that, because it was so easy, if I didn't have this awareness of truth telling, I would have been like, oh, I'm just not telling him because I'm not ready yet. Or like, it didn't occur to me to tell him, that kind of thing. But I knew I wanted to tell him, but there was fear on telling him because I was projecting colonial patriarchy onto him because he's white. And I was afraid that he would repress and shame me. When I did finally tell him, he actually didn't do any of those things. He really welcomed it. We had a healing conversation around it. He was like, I kind of always known that you were queer, right? And so that was really healing. And I realized that I was just projecting my fear of colonial patriarchy onto him. That was what made me feel unsafe to tell him. Where our insecurities started to come up was when I wanted to talk about the next truth. So like, you can kind of see it's kind of like layers, right? First, I realized I was queer, and then I had to claim it for myself. I need to really heal that for myself. And then I told my friends, and then I told my partner. And then the new truth emerged, which was I want to explore my sexuality as a queer person because I've only ever been in relationships with men. And that's when like his truth came up and was like, I don't know how I feel about that. And my truth came up where I'm like, but I really want it. And so we're working through that. But now that I know my truth and I'm queer, I get to take up space with it. So I'm like, I'm kind of like realizing actually I understand now why some of my fashion choices were the way they were. I understand now why I like growing out body hair. It doesn't feel right to me. Like it's part of my queerness, my embodiment of my queerness, and I get to explore what that means to me. But the journey to getting here was not easy because there were all these layers, and I'm 28. I only realized I was queer when I was 28. I had no idea. So it's been a journey of like practicing truth telling, and then when that big truth finally revealed itself, and the reason why I didn't know that I was queer is because the systemic oppression, right, of monogamy, of cis hetero normative culture, of the male gaze, patriarchy, all those dynamics, just it didn't allow for this part of myself to be expressed, right? I saw it in my parents, I saw it in the culture that I lived in, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't my truth, right? It's still a part of me. I still am queer. Instead, what happened was sometime during my childhood, probably the first time I felt attraction towards a woman and was like, this is wrong, like this can't exist, right? What happened was that truth, that part of me became fragmented from my conscious awareness. So conscious awareness is like our cognitive and rational thinking, right? It's what we are aware of. But the truth is we're actually unaware of like 90% of our governing decisions, our programming. It's the subconscious mind programming. For example, our subconscious, we don't need to like consciously tell our brain to pump blood from our heart. We don't need to tell our stomach to digest, right? These are the things that happen automatically. It's not in our conscious awareness. And so my queerness was fragmented from my conscious awareness, and it was living in my shadow body. There's a book called Belonging by Tokopa Turner that talks about the shadow, and she calls it the lost zones, where parts of our identity were fragmented and are now in the lost zone, right? But they can still be claimed, right? And so it wasn't conscious awareness, but it was still very much alive and desiring to be embodied. And so the more I grew in capacity to heal and to name my truth, that's when that part revealed itself again to me. And I was ready to receive it. So that's my story. I'd love to hear what's alive for you. How did that land? What's stirring within you? And you're welcome to take a break too if you like. Curious, actually, let's get a group vote. Can I get a yes in the chat if you want to share, or a yes if you want, or I don't know how to. Okay, put in break if you want to break, and yes if you want to share. Like yes if this, yes if that. Wait a minute. Well, we would take a 3-minute break if we were to take a break. Yes to sharing, break for a break. Yes to sharing. Okay, great. Can I get a vote from the other two? Okay, great. Awesome. So we'll pause, start the recording again. I will share it at the end of the recording, the last bit I shared. But yes, I'm curious, would you all like to receive Reiki, or would a guided practice on feeling the yes and the no in the body? Because, you know, being able to say yes and no makes space for our truth, right? Having boundaries protects our truth. Curious what feels most supportive, Reiki or practice? Drop it in the chat for me, please. Reiki? Okay. We got one vote for Reiki. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's do Reiki. It will be for about 5 minutes, just so that we end on time. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. Let's see, I'm gonna turn on some music for you all. Okay, so go ahead and find a comfortable seat or lay down.
Can you hear that music? Can someone give me a heads up or a yes? All right, loves. Enjoy. short and sweet. Slowly, just gently, perhaps wiggling your fingers and your toes. Perhaps making a full body stretch. The energy of this group is so beautiful and so tender. As you're ready, you can come back to the space, and it's 3:31, so if you have to hop off, totally great.